Right, 3 o'clock. I think we should probably get things started, just in the interest of staying on time and getting everyone back to their day at 3:30. So welcome everyone who's joined so far to Unlocking Meaningful Growth for Your Team. Today we're going to be talking about just that. So how can we look at growth in your team? How do we make sure that you're making strides to support meaningful growth, have great career conversations? Whether you're a team lead or an individual contributor in your team, we want you to feel really, really empowered to take control over growing your career. And we're going to talk about how to do that today. My name's Meg. I lead up customer success at Progression. I'm joined by my colleague Neil, co-founder of Progression, who's going to say hello and also introduce a little bit about Progression if you're new to us, or a little refresher if you're already a Progression user.
Cool. Thanks, Meg. Yep, I'm Neil, co-founder and CTO at Progression. Excited to talk a bit about unlocking growth for your team. I'm also a manager, also using Progression. So I'm experiencing the product as well. So a little bit about Progression. I know we have some existing customers, some folks that know the product a little bit, but just a quick refresher. Progression exists to give your team career clarity, and we do that with a set of tools for building frameworks and a content library, so you're not starting from scratch. Once you've rolled out those frameworks, we've got a set of tools for your team to measure and track their growth so that they get real clarity on both where they are and how far along they are to getting to where they want to go. And it's that second part we're going to talk about today, about unlocking that growth.
Great. Thanks, Neil. And with that, just to make sure everyone's with us and following along, what does unlocked career growth look like to you? We would love to know your thoughts on this and what you're hoping to kind of unlock in your teams following the webinar today. So pop a little message in the chat. While you do, we'll tell you a little bit about what we think at Progression unlocked career growth looks like and how we can support that as well. So what does unlocked career growth look like to us? We think that unlocked career growth requires an open and clear channel for someone to discuss their progress at work. So setting aside some dedicated time to talk about that, and also having the facility to be able to track your progress. So if you're an individual, whether you're a team lead or an individual contributor, it's so important for you to be able to look back over time and see how you've progressed in your career. So we think that being able to record that day to day using a tool like Progression and being able to share that back when you're talking about your career is really important, because we say career growth really is a team sport, but it does actually require you as an individual to kind of take control of that and start driving that forward. You're really the only person who's going to be able to push your career forward with the support of the people that you work with and the people that you know. To do that as well, we think it's really important for skills for your current role and for roles that you're interested in moving into in future to be really well defined. So what that means is that you should have visibility on the skills that you need for your role and the roles that you're aiming for. So outlining those in a framework like we do at Progression is really important so that you can start to really have great career conversations around that as well.
Cool. Thanks, Meg. So let's crack on and look a bit at how Progression can help with that process of unlocking growth. So we're going to talk through some of the features that we have and how they're commonly used. So we're going to start off with this idea of saving your accomplishments. So at Progression, one of our core beliefs is that career growth happens week in and week out. It doesn't happen once a year at the annual performance review. It's happening when somebody gives a workshop that really lands well. It's happening when you put together a proposal that's accepted by the senior exec, or it's happening when you get great feedback on a pull request from a senior engineer, and it's a language that you're just learning at the moment. So these moments are happening week in and week out, and it's important that you capture these and you log them so that when the moment of truth comes, whether it's a quarterly check-in, whether it's an annual review, you have a backlog of what those accomplishments are. And the thing with these is that they're not always straightforward to spot. So in Progression, we allow you to log them for yourself, of course, but as a manager, you can log them for reports, and you can also log them for your peers. So sometimes you can be so caught up in the day-to-day, you don't actually realize that, yeah, you totally nailed that presentation, and actually like that's a real step change in your performance. So you can look out for your peers and your reports as well as for yourself.
Great, thanks, Neil. And we also have a feature on progression called check-ins, and check-ins are a 3-step process where you can have a really detailed career conversation, and wins, like Neil's just been talking about, are a real sort of indicator of where you're working on specific skills and where you're achieving really good things relating to specific skills as well. So we think that all of those wins and other features that we're going to talk about in a moment help to build up a really clear picture of where you're focusing and where you want to go with your career. Check-ins help you have a milestone moment where you can reflect in step 1 on your progress against each skill that's specified for your role. Your manager or a peer, if you've chosen to check in with a colleague or someone else in your team, can then capture their perspective on your progress relating to those specific skills. And then you can come together in step 3, which is a joint discussion, to kind of talk about your progress, how you feel you're doing, and agree next steps and set some actions as well. So this is a really solid way to have a really sort of measured, substantial conversation about your career progress with someone in your organization, and take stock of how far you've come already and where you want to go in the future as well.
Cool. So we've been tracking our accomplishments. We've used those to advocate for ourselves in this check-in process. We've pulled in feedback from our manager on how we're doing. We've now got this really clear understanding of where we're doing well, where we're meeting expectations, and where we've got more work to do. So the next step to unlocking growth is picking out some skills to focus on and then figuring out how you're going to push those forwards. There's different approaches. There's to thinking about this. Some people take the Olympian approach, where you just want to get very good at one thing. Olympic weightlifters are terrible at sprinting, and it doesn't matter because they're great at weightlifting. Or you might want to think about more about the all-rounder approach, where you really want to improve some of your weaknesses before you start doubling down on strengths. So there's a couple of options, but regardless of which way you're going on that, in progression, you can pick the skills you want to focus on. Typically, we see positions having 12 to 15, 16 skills. You're not going to be able to work on all of those at once. So we encourage you to pick 2 or 3 of those skills that you're going to focus on for the next 6 weeks or 12 weeks. Once you've decided on that, you can set some actions. And actions are not lofty career goals. It's not the idea of making staff engineer within 3 years. These are tangible goals, tangible actions that you can work towards over the next 4 weeks, 6 weeks, to have a very clear definition of done, and that will represent sort of meaningful progress on the way to getting to where you want to go. So if you've decided that giving feedback is an area you want to work on, one action might be to take an online course or read a book. Another action might be to give feedback once a week for the next 6 weeks. And another action might be to request feedback from peers. So you can set some sort of really tangible things to work towards. And as a manager, you can help to hold your reports accountable by checking in on how they're doing with those actions.
Great, thanks, Neil. And just on that sort of feedback point, requesting feedback is a really important part of being able to develop your skills. You know, you want to get other people's perspectives on how you're doing, where you're doing really well, where you maybe have opportunities to improve and progress and maybe take on some more training or support to take that next step as well. So feedback on progression allows you to kind of take control of that process. You can ask for feedback relating to specific skills in your framework that relate specifically to your role or the role that you want to move into as well. So you can start to request feedback where you feel like you need it most, and also on skills that you're focusing on developing right now. And that feedback that you're getting means that you can then start to set meaningful actions and start recording wins on areas where you're doing really well. So it keeps everything really related to the skills that are required for your position today. So we're really grounding the conversations that you're going to have around something specific and measurable and attainable for you, so that you can kind of take your career conversations out of the theoretical and back into the work that you're doing day to day as well.
Awesome. So let's have a bit of a demo and a look at those 4 areas: wins, check-ins, focus skills, and feedback, and see what they look like in the app and how you can use it. So can you see this okay? This coming through fine? All right, so I'm here on my feed. When you log into Progression, this is the view that you're going to see. And I've got a feed of all the sort of the growth-related activity that's been happening across my reporting line. I'm logged in as Jane. I'm a manager with a few reports, and I can sort of see what's going on here. So first up, with wins, tracking those accomplishments that you're having. Dead simple. We've got this big box at the top where you can track your accomplishments. You'll also see this big green add button that takes you to the same sort of capture form from most places in the app. We also have a great Slack integration, so you can do all this from a / command within Slack as well. But for today, I'm going to show you what it looks like in the app. So when we're logging a win, as you mentioned, you can do it for yourself, for your reports, for your peers, and you can do them for multiple people as well if it's sort of a group win. So in this case, I'm going to pick a couple of my reports, and I'm going to pick the skill, and maybe it's going to be on attention to detail. And I can also pick the visibility. So I can choose to make it visible to everybody at the organization, or just the recipients and their reporting line. And then in here, I can just sort of type up the content of the win. So go into a bit of detail about what I thought they did particularly well. And just so you can see what that looks like, if it's for myself, maybe I'm going to change the skill for that. I can also choose to keep it private. So there's some wins that I might not want to brag about to the whole organization. I might not even want my manager to sort of monitor that I'm recording. And I can still go ahead and do that so that I have a track record for myself. Aligned with that, notes are pretty similar. You can track notes on things that maybe didn't go so well. So not every learning comes from a success. Sometimes it comes from something that didn't go so well, but you still want to record. So you can do that with a note. Once you've built up that evidence, you can then start to see how it's applied in check-ins. So I'm just going to quickly jump down to look at a check-in in progress, so you can see what that looks like. So the check-in, you're going through each step, you're going through each skill, and we're working through whether we're working towards meeting or exceeding the requirements for that skill. Typically, we see these happen once per quarter. And I don't know about other people on the call, but I struggle to remember what I did last week, never mind 12 weeks ago. So here in progression, if I've been tracking these wins, completing actions, I'm going to have a log here of everything that's happened since my last check-in. And I can use that to prompt my memory and my manager's memory of what went well. So that can be really helpful to sort of go through and fill in the check-in. Once I've been through that process, then I start to get this really visual map of how I'm doing versus the role. So the gray blob is what my role looks like, and the green blob is what I look like. And we can start to see where I'm doing better than is required for the position, where I'm got some more work to do, and where I'm meeting requirements. And the great thing is, once I've done this, once I sort of know how I'm doing compared to my role, I can start to compare it to see what I would look like against other roles. So if I'm looking at a straight promotion, this would be what I need to do. If I'm looking at do a horizontal movement, I can see how I would look as well. And then right below, I've got a record of all that conversation that that I've put in, and I can also refer back to those updates that I've been logging. So this is that sort of point in time where I can benchmark myself against the framework. Once I've done that, I'm going to start thinking about what I want to do next. So typically, I'm going to pick some skills to focus on. And again, I might want to choose the ones that I'm working towards, or I might want to double down on the ones I'm doing really well. Regardless, I'm just going to come over here to my user profile, and I'm just going to star some of these skills that I want to focus on for the next quarter. Now that I've done that, when I go back to my feed, I've got these starred skills here. I can see them up top as well when I'm logging wins. I'm going to start thinking about some actions. So maybe I want to start thinking about communication, and this is going to be visible to my reporting line. I want this to happen before the end of April, and I can now put in an action to work on group communication. Obviously, I would make it a bit more of a SMART goal in the real world, but now I've got this action showing up here. I've got a date on it so that my manager can hold me accountable. And when I complete those, it's going to show up in my check-in next time. So I got this sort of growth flywheel happening. Finally, another really powerful way to understand what you can be doing to improve is with feedback. So in progression, you can give feedback to people as you might expect, but what we think is more powerful than that is being able to request feedback from specific people. So this is particularly useful where, as a line manager, so for example, I manage 6 engineers, and I'm not always close to the engineering work they're doing. So when I have a mid-level engineer who wants to get to senior, I'm not necessarily the best person to tell them specifically what they need to be doing in React to get to the next level. Sure, I can help them with communication or with stakeholder management, but not with all skills. So what they can do is put in a feedback request. They can select some of their peers who they think would be well placed to provide feedback. And they can type something in here like, hey, I'm looking to get to senior this year. What are 3 things you think I could do to improve my software architecture, for example, or whatever skill it is? So you can request feedback in here. They're going to get a notification in Slack over email. They're going to be nudged when they don't respond to that. And the output of that can be really useful. What you typically do then is, in your one-to-one, go through some of that feedback and work with your manager to pull out some actions from that. So that was just a very quick overview of how you can use those 4 features: wins, check-ins, focus skills, and feedback, to build up this sort of growth flywheel of recognizing where you need to improve or where you want to improve, setting goals, hitting the goals, and then benchmarking over again. So with that, I'm going to jump back to the presentation and let's talk a bit about next steps.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And just before we jump into the next steps, please feel free to add any questions you might have on anything that we've run through or covered so far, anything that comes to mind in the chat. We're going to try and answer as many of those as possible toward the end of the session as well. So feel free to add them in the chat and we'll get to as many as we can. But with all of those lovely sort of tips and tricks, some next steps for you if you're a team member. So we think that these 4 things are really, really easy next steps for you to take on and start really engaging with your career growth and unlocking that as well. So first of all, add a win. Attending this webinar does count. You've taken the first step to kind of engaging with your career growth, thinking about how best to do that within your team and for yourself. So get into progression, add a win. If you're not using progression right now, you can still write it down, still make note of it, sign up for a free trial of progression as well. Really easy to do. I know that we've got someone in the chat who mentioned that they're keeping track of wins on Notion. Great to just keep track of them at all. Progression helps you link those back to specific skills. So just taking that up to the next level. Set up to 3 focus skills. So as Neil mentioned, you can't focus on every skill associated to your position all of the time. You're going to want to hone in on a few. We say up to 3 just because that helps keep you really focused and really set on your goals. But just making a note and even a mental note of where you're going to focus your time and your energy over a specific period of time is a really good first step to sort of helping you elevate and go to the next level on those particular skills. We think it's also really important to set actions. So add your first career growth action. If you're not sure what that action should be, try requesting feedback from your manager, from your peers, whoever that might be. Ask them, what are 3 things that I should really focus on improving and working on over the next month or 2 months or 3 months, whatever that time period might be. It's a really nice way to get people involved in your progress and kind of get inspiration from people who are able to get a different perspective on the work that you're doing day to day and maybe aren't living in the weeds of what you're doing like you will be from project to project. And finally, start or complete your first check-in. It's really great, like I said, just to kind of set a milestone moment, take stock of where you are today and start to think about where you want to be. That might be, moving towards a promotion. It might be moving towards some additional trainings and support. You might just want to become a specialist in a specific area. So starting a check-in can help you define, where you want to focus your time, where you're doing well, where you want to ask for some additional support, and where you're really hitting it out of the park. So start or complete your next check-in. It's a really great first step.
Cool, thanks, Meg. And if you're a team lead, if you're managing people, there's also a few things you can do, dead simple, to get you started with unlocking growth. So first up is set up a ritual or a process for wins and feedback. in our household, we're a big fan of the book Atomic Habits. And the main premise is, if you don't have a habit around something like going to the gym or eating healthy, it's really hard to do. And the same applies here with wins and feedback. If you don't have a habit of giving wins or feedback, it can be quite hard to recognize when to do it. So what we do is we have Wins Friday. Every Friday, 3 p.m. we get a Slack notification from our progression instance, and we log some wins for each other of just recognizing sort of what we've achieved and what's gone well this week. And just doing that sort of builds the muscle of recognizing achievements and gets people familiar with the process. So you can actually set that up from your org setting page today. Once you've set up the Slack app, you can pick which channel, which day, what time, and you'll get a nice notification, a little GIF to get that up and going. Same applies for feedback. Building a culture of feedback in an organization can take years. It's not the sort of thing that happens overnight. But the best way to get started is just with a simple habit. So as a manager, you might decide to give yourself the goal of looking for an opportunity once a week or once a month to give feedback, and just start small. It doesn't have to be this big sort of moment of truth. We need to have a conversation about this thing. It can be something quite small, quite tactical, and it just gets you into the habit of pulling something up, stepping out the day-to-day, and just like, hey, you could improve on this thing. And encourage your reports to give you feedback as well. Ask for feedback in one-to-ones. That sort of gives them permission to mention things that could be improved. Next up, encourage your team members to start check-ins. So I know some companies have quite a strict cadence. They'll do, okay, first day of every quarter, we'll kick off check-ins, and that's great. That works for some organizations. But for others, different points in time can actually be sort of more relevant. So when somebody is starting a new position, if they've just joined the company, doing a check-in in the first 6 weeks can be a great way of setting expectations around growth, getting to know someone's skills a bit better. If somebody is hankering after a promotion, they're making a lot of noise in their one-to-ones about what do I need to be doing, do a check-in with the next position up. So see how they're doing against sort of the skills required for that position. So you can use check-ins quite tactically. And again, it's super easy just to skip the skills that you don't want to focus on. So when you're going through, you'll see a little skip link. Just click that. And if you've checked in with the skill in the past, it's just going to use that level. Otherwise, it'll just ignore it. And then you can sort of work through for the skills that really matter to you quite quickly through the check-in. So have a go at that. And finally, talk to other managers, talk to leadership about expectations around career conversation cadence. So I know some managers are very methodical about this. They will have almost a schedule of one-to-ones where 1 in 4 one-to-ones are going to talk about career development. After that, the next one-to-one, they're going to talk about how the week-to-week is going. And the one after that, they're going to talk about how home life is. Other companies do it in a more sort of ad hoc way, but have that conversation with other managers about what sort of a culture do we want to build in this organization. Is it one where we're talking about career development every week? Is it one where it's a quarterly conversation? But don't leave it up to chance. Be intentional about it, and sort of set yourself some goals around having those career conversations.
Great. Thanks, Neil. And if in doubt, or if you've got any questions at all following the session today, we can help. We're here to help. We have a live chat offering in the product. So if you head over to Progression, you'll see a chat bubble in the bottom right-hand corner. Feel free to reach out to us at any time there. We also have a community on Slack. So you can join the community at progression.fyi/community. We'll be taking all the questions that we answered today and any that we don't get to as well, and answering them in the community alongside other, we'll share other valuable resources and valuable insight as well in that community as well. There's over 300 members of that community all ready to sort of chat about progression and unlocking growth as well. So feel free to head over there. The link is in the chat if you need it. But for now, any questions at all? We've got a couple coming in, so let's try and answer some of those. I can see a really great question from Will. Any tips for creating a culture of giving feedback? We're trying to embed rituals and have trained the team on feedback frameworks, but it's still tough. Yeah, it can be really tough starting to build out a culture of feedback in an organization. We've got both Johnny and Neil, who are Progression founders, on the call and have worked really hard at kind of building this feedback culture into Progression. Neil, I'm not sure if you want to sort of take this one on.
Yeah, Well, I want to shout out something that Johnny did, which was so obviously we dog food progression. We use progression. We try as hard as we can to sort of live up to our values. And this was maybe 6 months ago. We just shipped the feedback feature, and we wanted to build a culture of feedback from the get-go. But sort of building this feature meant, okay, now we actually need to be doing it to test the feature. And what Johnny did was request feedback from the whole organization, literally feedback request for everybody. And in the all hands a few weeks after that, actually shared the feedback. He obviously let people know that he was going to be sharing feedback, but he shared the feedback with the rest of the organization. And as you might expect, there was some good feedback, there was some tough feedback, there was some stuff that was probably quite uncomfortable to share with everybody. But that sort of leading from example, that vulnerability, and sort of letting people know that, hey, it's all right to get feedback that's uncomfortable. Like, that's how you grow. And that's like, the only thing more uncomfortable than that is not hearing it and making the same mistake over and over again and not knowing you're doing it. So I think that's sort of leading by example, leading from the top, and that quite extreme example of like, I'm just going to share everything I get with people. I thought that was really effective. So that could be something you try. Maybe it's with your reports. If you're in the position to do it with a wider team, maybe that's something you can do. But yeah, that's something that comes to mind.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Neil. That's a really good example. And as you say, that feels like quite an extreme. There are also ways that you can do this without kind of publishing feedback across the organization as well. So a lot of sort of feedback culture is feeling comfortable and confident, sharing feedback and receiving feedback as well. And we do sort of advocate for giving feedback that's tough, making sure that you're still having human conversations, one-to-one conversations. If feedback is particularly challenging, or, you know, you think it could be maybe misinterpreted, if it's just written down and comes off, you know, a little bit cold, make sure you're having that conversation on top of, you know, writing this down. It's really great to log feedback and show that you're working on it, but it will never replace sort of the power of a one-to-one conversation. So make sure that you're kind of leaving avenues for people to talk to you about feedback. And a lot of that is, you know, living those values yourself. Ask for feedback from other people, give feedback to other people, make sure that it's a mixture of, you know, you've done something really well and, oh, I think maybe you could, you know, try this different approach on XYZ project and you might get a slightly different result. Or, you know, not everything that you're going to give feedback on is going to be bad, not everything you give feedback on is going to be good. There's going to be some sort of, you know, not earth-shattering feedback, some really sort of powerful feedback. Make sure that you're getting a really good mixture of it, and leaving a place for that conversation to happen around the evidence that you're recording day to day to kind of work on in future as well. We had one other question. I'm conscious we've got just a couple of minutes left, but we've got Cleet has said, it's often very helpful to get feedback from stakeholders outside of our org. In order to give feedback, do you also have to have a progression license? Thinking about sales leaders, support leaders and peers in services. So great question, Cleet. You're not the first person to ask this. At the moment, they do need to be a progression user to log feedback in progression, or through our Slack app that we have as well. But watch this space. We'll definitely think about it. I know we've got a couple of members from progression product and engineering on the call today. So yeah, we'll let you know if that should change in future. But at the moment, yes, you do need to be logged into progression to record that in progression. With that, we're going to wrap up for the afternoon. Thank you so much to everyone who's made the time to come along. We will be emailing out a recording of the session as well if any of your colleagues couldn't make it today. As I said, we'll also be following up conversation-wise in the progression community, just with some thoughts and some questions and answers from the session today as well. So don't forget to join. Links here, links in the chat as well. And as always, just reach out if you need anything. We're here to help.
All right. Great stuff. Thanks everyone for your time, and we'll speak to you soon.